The Chair I now recognize myself for a few questions. Mr. Tyler, in your testimony, in your written testimony, you said one example from the Department of Agriculture grant program is the school breakfast program. It should have records for approximately $4.5 billion in fiscal year 2017, but searches for this program return no records. And then you go on to point out that Department of Transportation oversees the Federal Transit Capital Investment Grants Program, which spent approximately $4.6 billion in 2017, but USA spending records only show $1.6 billion of that. That's less than half, as you pointed out. Did you or your organization attempt to research this further? And what I'm trying to find out is, has there been any two things? Has there been any effort to try to determine why we don't have complete records, and then after that, what happened to the money?
Mr. Chairman, your question goes to one of the key issues we're facing now with this website and the Implementation of Data Act, and also refers back to the question that Mr. Raskin asked. There is a lot of data missing and a lot of inaccurate data on the website, and this is a problem. The fact that
and this is on USA spending records or just across the board?
On USA spending records I'm referring to, sir.
Okay.
That's correct. And we want to see more data. We want to see more complete data. We want to see more accurate data. The examples we gave in my testimony showed some rather serious lacks there. The Government Accountability Office has also done some very good work detailing this. In fact, looking at a lot of the reports of the various inspectors general. Without complete data, we simply do not have a complete picture. Progress is being made. One other aspect is making sure the data is accessible to the public and to Congress. We, as POGO, put together a letter, which a very long one, pointing out many ways of improving not only the data, but access to the data. And we think that it's an important thing to move forward. Its relevance to grants is twofold. First off, we want to make sure the grant data on USA spending is correct and complete. But secondly, as we move forward on grants reform, we should learn from some of the history of how to implement the Data Act.
Let me, Mr. Hollister, you, in response to the question raised by the ranking member, Mr. Raskins, seem to know a great deal about USA spending. What expectation should we have that the data that they have now is up to date and accurate, and could answer the question about the $4.5 billion in the breakfast program and the $3 billion that is unaccounted for in the transportation?
Yes, sir. The law currently requires every agency to report all of its spending using this common format to the usaspending.gov system, which is maintained by the Treasury Department. The responsibility belongs to the agencies, not to the Treasury. Of course, there are challenges in taking the world's largest and most complex organization, the U.S. federal government, all of the disparate means of accounting that all those agencies use, all of the hundreds, thousands of different financial systems, putting all that information into one view. So there are some technical problems. However, if I could offer a suggestion, the fastest way for Congress to fix the quality of that data that's up there on that website for taxpayers is to appropriate based on it. Tell the agencies that if they don't report the spending to the usaspending.gov portal, you'll assume that's all that they got, and you'll only appropriate that much more. I think you'll find a great deal of improvement in the quality of Congress appropriates based on what's there.
Well, that brings me back, gets me to a point that I've been trying to make here for 3 years, 7 months, and 22 days. That's how long I've been in Congress. And that is, you generally get what you expect, define, and hold people accountable for. And that would apply to grant making. I think it's incumbent on the federal government to make it very clear expectations on performance and cost, but at the same time for people who apply for grants that we do a good job of evaluating the grant request that should have clearly defined objectives that are measurable, and that we should be exercising oversight over to make sure that when we spend that money, we get what we paid for. I don't think we do that, and that's a problem across the board. I hope what we're doing now, and particularly with the legislation that's been introduced by Dr. Fox and Mr. Gomez, that we get much, much closer to that kind of accountability and oversight. Ms. Sager, Also, in regard to the breakfast program and the Department of Agriculture and Department of Transportation, is this something that GAO would be able to answer, where that money is?
We certainly would be happy to assist. In addition to broad grant management reform engagements, we also do a number of specific projects looking at individual grant programs or individual aspects of grant programs. So we certainly would be happy to assist. And of course, accountability is our middle name at GAO. So we would be happy to help the committee.
Well, GAO is one of my favorite agencies in the federal government. I joke with people back home that a lot of people anticipate the latest novel from their favorite author. I anticipate the latest publication from GAO. I'm going to go a little over. We're going to do another round, so I'm going to exercise a little flexibility here as chairman. I want to stay on this line about this USA spending and GAO. Is there a working relationship between you and USA spending, so that you're an exchange of information, an ability to cross-reference?
Absolutely. We are required under the Data Act to produce reports looking at the implementation of the Act. So we most recently did a report that compiled some of the findings from the Inspectors General, the SIGI community, that came out earlier this week. We had done our own report looking at the first quarter of data submitted last year in 2017. And although, as we have heard, there has been great progress, there are still opportunities to continue for continuous improvement. It is to be expected, given the size and breadth of the federal government, that this would be incremental, but particularly in terms of completeness, accuracy, and data quality, there are still great strides that remain, and so we remain in touch on in a couple of ways with OMB and Treasury, looking at data governance, following up on the Section 5 pilot that we heard about.
Well, it was also mentioned by Mr. Hollister about what the law requires. And the law requires that all agencies report on their improper payments. And we know that, and that includes the federal programs, and there were 18 programs that did not report, including managed care for Medicaid, which I think could be a significant addition to the improper payments from last year. It was $141 billion, 36.3 of which was the non-managed care part of Medicaid. In regard to grants, programs. I think Mr. Raskin mentioned 15%. Historically, what has that rate been, and how well are we monitoring the improper payments on that end? And there is, that includes fraudulent grants. Right.
Improper payments is something I know you have heard from our Comptroller General. He cares deeply about it, and for good reason. We spend billions of dollars on federal programs, and you have appropriated them for a reason, to serve something you consider a public good. And so it is something that we continue to plan to follow. It is in many cases, waste, fraud, or abuse. And so we, of course, look forward to continuing that work for this committee. If there are particular areas that we have not already looked at, but you are interested in, we would certainly be happy to talk with you and your staff and determine how we could do that going forward.
Well, it's an area that I'm very focused on right now. But one of the thing that I want to try to get to is to figure out a way not only to reduce improper payments, but to get the federal agencies and federal programs to comply with federal law in their reporting. With that, I will yield and